Hey, welcome guys. Today we have the Star Trek Deep Space Nine Runabout. This is the old AMT kit. I believe it was released sometime in the 90s. I know they've re-released it. I don't know if the re-release has been modified in any way. I don't have one of those particular models. I think it may come with some kind of dome base. But this is the old kit. I found this on eBay. It was actually still wrapped in the plastic. So I know that it had not been opened or worked on. I always like to kind of take a brief look before I start my videos. So anyway, looks to be in really good shape. Has a very molten, very bright white color. It seems like, I don't remember, had they always been molded in that very bright white? I don't remember what colors they came in. So you have the two parts of the body, which makes up the model, of course, the instructions. The decal sheet looks to be in pretty good condition. I built one of these years ago. I actually have a decal sheet like this that I've used some of the decals for various projects. First, you get your clear parts, chiller grills, Bussard collectors, windows, looks like your impulse engines, and that's maybe a few other little things. That's good. And then you get a bag of parts here. Let's go ahead and open that up. Looks like we have the pylons, which also contain the impulse engines. We've got the brackets for the module that goes on top. I'm not sure. I think that module, does it fire torpedoes from the module? Is that a weapons pod? I think it's interchangeable. Anyway, here's the body to the pod. You got different parts of the ship, and of course we have our warp nacelles. So everything looks to be in really good condition. Excuse me, not a whole lot of parts. I do plan on lighting this. Now, I kind of thought about maybe trying to work out some kind of interior, but for me, this isn't going to be that project. I'll end up spending way more time just trying to do an interior, and I'm just not that dedicated to, not that interested, I guess, in doing that with this model. But it does have plenty of space if you wanted to do that. I think I have seen people who have actually built out an interior, since you have all those clear windows, and built out a cockpit. But I think I'm just going to blacken the windows, but we will light the outside. There's still plenty of lighting we can do. Obviously, we'll do the warp nacelles. We'll do the impulse engines. You have these grills that go on the kind of supports here, the pylons that come out, and I've noticed that there's kind of this orange glow, so I'm going to try to light that. We'll cut away those sections right in there, and that will have an orange glow. I believe there's some lighting in the module that gets joined. It looks like we have I think a couple of lights in there. I'll have to see what all shows up, but we'll plenty of room to kind of light that up, it looks like. And maybe a few other little lights here and there. I'll have to find some screenshots. So that's my plan. So let's get started with it. All right, well, there's been a lot of R&D going into this project, just starting with the warp nacelles. I've changed it several times. This is what I think is going to work for me. I tried using like some blue LED tape. Just wasn't happy how all that was coming together. I'm using some high intensity 5mm LED tape, bright white color. And as you can see here, I've also soldered in a couple of red LEDs for the Bussard collector. Now the Bussard collector was a clear part. I sanded with some very fine sandpaper on the outside. Then I took some opaque red paint, not even transparent, and painted on the inside, covered it all with a matte clear coat to protect everything. And that's really diffusing the light really well. Now I made a little insert that will fit right inside the Bussard collector right here, as you can see here, and drill some holes, 3mm holes for our two red LEDs, and I'm not getting any hot spots with this setup. I think a lot of that's just the diffusion that's going on in the Bussard collector itself. Now the chiller grills I have I've sanded and did some blue Testors transparent paint. I may add another coat of this opaque blue paint on here. There's a lot of light going on here. These are going to illuminate one way or the other, but this may do the job. I have to do some more testing before I finalize that. However, it's going to be attached to the bottom of the warp nacelle. Of course, we have our wiring that's going to go out and through the struts, I guess, that hold the warp nacelles. The top will fit on right in here, and we do have some running lights, the green and red port and starboard running lights. I think there's two. I've already kind of sanded the knob off. This one's hard to see on this white surface. I'll sand that and drill some holes, and I think if I just run some colored fiber optics into there, we can get some solid running lights just off the light from our LED tape. So we'll only have one strand of power cords coming out that will go into the main body, but that should illuminate everything. I have tested the lights. Seems to I'm not getting any bleed back from this configuration right here from the red light. Now on the impulse engines, I had some parts here. I had to do quite a bit of well, not quite a bit, but a little bit of drilling out. You can see right here, this was a closed off part where our impulse engines are at that are going to the sides of the struts here. I call them struts, maybe something else. So this is the rear housing, and this part, well, actually, let me this one. This will go right in here, and that'll be our impulse engine. So I'll still have to cut in here, and this is where we'll store a light. We have a nice big area in here, but also on the front of it, I had to open up this piece right here. This was solid, had kind of a mesh pattern in here. Just drilled a series of holes and then used my X-Acto knife to cut out the bulk of it. Then a lot of sanding and some files, a little bit tricky right in here. I got some odd shapes going on, but just a little patience and some small files such as this really did a job of getting in and cleaning that up. So I've opened that up, and what I'm going to do is I'll take this, I had some screen, I think this from like an old screen door or something, and we'll cut out a section or so. We'll put that over it like that, and then we'll diffuse a piece of clear plastic to back that up, and then we'll have a orange light inside. So that's kind of the plan. We'll have to open this section up right here on the front to accommodate that lighting. Of course, we'll have to run some lighting come out here that goes into our warp nacelle. So just it was a lot of kind of back and forth, especially with the warp nacelle on how to light it. I went from putting the lights on top to the bottom to thinking about adding different lights for the marker lights. I think this was a simple solution that should light everything pretty good. We got a nice red color. These are red LEDs going into this red filter. So there's a nice glowing red color up here, and we should be able to illuminate our chiller grills pretty nicely. Now, this is white, and here's where I'm kind of debating whether I should light block the inside of these or leave them white and let the white bounce. White makes a good reflector when you're enclosing these, and maybe just light block the outside, which can be a little tricky. Probably takes a couple coats of black paint to completely light block that. So still haven't, I'm going to do a little bit more testing before I decide which way to go on that. Nothing's glued in at this point, just kind of testing it all out. And but we're getting there. I have a direction. The first one's always the hardest. Second one, I know I'm doing, or at least I think I have a plan. I don't know if I'm doing, but I do have a plan on how to put it together. I've still got to trim out the other one of these panels. That didn't take very long. And then I have to open up the sides. So a lot of R&D, but it's coming along. All right, I'm about ready to seal up my first warp nacelle here. Just want to show you what the inside looks like. Now, I did light block the inside. I did a flat black coat followed up by a white coat to bounce that light around. There's just a whole lot of light going in here. This is going to be on the top. I was afraid it was just going to create a glow. So as you see here, I have my light strip in place. I got the wiring coming out that's going to go through the nacelle. It's not going through that slot. There's actually a little hole that I drilled in there to go into the strut that comes down. Again, I have my red 3mm LEDs wired, and they're wired into my light strip here. And I have my blue parts, clear parts glued in, and my red front Bassard collector glued in, so this will fit on top. And I have this wire bent a little bit, so I'm going to add a little bit of glue just before I close it to make sure that this wire doesn't drop down and you get like a shadow in here. But this will close over, and I drilled these holes out for the running lights, and I've tested it with the lights on, and I think it's 1mm fiber optic. It illuminates just fine using this interior light, and I will paint those fiber optics to give them the green and red colors. So that part's done. I got still have to do the other one, but it'll be the same process on that one. Now the struts that come down are the impulse engine area. I go ahead and cleaned out all the parts, and I was going to use this like mesh from like a screen door here, but it just wasn't holding its shape and was getting all bent out of place. And so I glued this black part in there, and what that is this from Hobby Lobby. This is a plastic canvas for like yarn, go in and out, and it's very inexpensive, like 69 cents for a large sheet. I've had this for a while. You can tell where I've just used little bits for different projects. Excuse me. And you can see where I've cut that into shape. Now, this material is something about it is just hard to glue. Even super glue doesn't want to attach to it. And I think it was Bolite Hobbies I saw where you can take a lighter and kind of braise it a little, and that will help the I guess it texturizes that plastic enough to where super glue will now hold it in place. So that's what I did with this piece. I brazed it with a lighter, and then super glue was able to get a good grip on it. Now hopefully the paint will be able to stick to the part here. I still have to add a clear piece here. I will diffuse it, I'll sand it and matte coat it, and that'll be inside to help diffuse the lighting once I install that. But I'm going to go ahead and light block and go ahead and paint this section, because once I put that clear piece, there'll be no way to mask all that off, or very difficult to do all these little squares. So I think I need to go ahead and try to at least put the base color on this section right here, to where I don't have to try to mask all those individual parts off. Also, when I'm painting, I can go ahead and paint get the inside of this impulse nozzle. We'll have some lighting in here. If I go ahead and paint it, then I can just put something in here to block, to mask it off when I go ahead and paint this section. Or I can just go ahead and paint all of it. Now I'm still figuring all of it out, but I'll still have to make a little compartment for the red impulse engine, and then this orange, I guess it's a Bassard collector, I guess. No, it's not Bassard collector, it's Warpman engines. I'm not sure what this is, but it glows orange in some scenes of the Runabout. So figuring all that out, it's coming slowly. This was back and forth a few times, and I'm not completely happy with how the chiller grills are coming out. What I'll probably do is once I get it sealed up, I'll mask this off and do a very light opaque blue across this to kind of unify the color. It's just kind of splotchy. So we'll go ahead and finish these up and come back when we have some more progress. All right, here's what I have going on for the impulse engine and the front intake, I guess, or whatever this part would be. Changed it up a little bit, did remove the black grid. This didn't look right to me. So you can see I kind of light blocked it with some flat black paint. I've created a little box to do our red impulse engine here. I took some clear plastic, you can't see it, but I took some clear plastic and diffused it much like this piece here. I sanded it, and I'll spray it with some matte clear coat. Anyway, there's a small piece of that right up against the inside of this exhaust port for the impulse engine, and that will help diffuse the light. And there's I believe that's a 3mm red LED going into this little makeshift box. Not pretty, but it works good. It keeps the light inside there and not bleeding out because this part is orange. This is a orange 5mm LED. You can see I have it kind of mounted. I put some chrome tape to just kind of help bounce the light around, and that's where I will, once I get it painted, I will glue this into position to help diffuse that light. But I want to paint this with our base color first. I'll have to mask off the inside of this. So when I go to, otherwise it's going to be really difficult to paint all the small detail. And I'll have to try to mask all that off inside there. It'd be easier just to paint it. And so I'll have these wires coming up into the main body. Of course, I'll have the warp nacelle. You can see where I have a hole drilled out already that corresponds with the wires. And that will go in just like this. Now my plan is to consolidate all these three wires, groups of wires, into one, and then that one will go into the main body. So, but I think that will work out pretty good. So that's the plan on that. All right, well, here is our mission pod. I guess it can be a weapons pod or a sensor pod, whatever they need it to be. So I'm gonna have this have its own power source, and you can see the fiber optics coming out. We'll have the 4 little lights. So what I've done, the top part right here is not glued on yet. I'm just showing you how this all is going to fit together. Of course, the legs at some point will be added in to the pod. However, to turn it on and off, what I had done is attached some magnets to the inside. These are just little flathead screws that I hot glued in there that were the right size for these particular magnets. And as you can tell, that will just fit on like that. We may have a little bit of gap, but it won't be too noticeable. And overall, I think it has a kind of a nice fit. However, inside we have a little 3-volt battery holder, and it has an on and off switch. And inside I've attached a small SMD that will be lighting the fiber optics. And we can just turn that on there. You see it cuts on and lights our fiber optics. Obviously, we'll trim those once the painting is completed. The fiber optics and the SMD were attached inside just using some of this UV resin, and then I put a little hot glue to secure the wires of the switch so I don't pull everything out when I take the switch out, but I can just kind of finagle this in here. And it does take a little bit of finagling, but that will go on like that, and we'll cover our switch. I thought about putting a little switch so I don't have to take it out, but that would just be more wiring, and I was afraid I might not be able to get the battery in and out. The more stuff I can put in there right now, it's not too difficult to kind of pull this battery in and out and put our cap back on. So that's what I'm doing for the mission pod, and like how that has worked out. And now we'll move on to, I think we're going to be getting ready to start priming stuff. There's a little bit more assembling. See where I've masked off one of the nacelles. I still have to finish the other one. So that's ready to be primed. I will attach it to the struts that hold the nacelles to the body. As you can see, this one here. Now that I don't have to attach the weapon pod, and that was one of the things is wiring this to the main body. This actually connects to these struts, and you'd have to run the wires kind of, so a little bit more wiring, and plus it'll be a lot easier to paint now that this is a separate piece. So I have to assemble these, and we're getting ready to start putting the model all together. There's a bit more wiring and lighting to do. I think a strobe and some more marker running lights on the main body here. I'll have to look at some reference pictures to figure out exactly what I'm going to do with it. So we'll just keep going forward with it. All right, as you can see here, I'm starting to get some of this assembled. I've put on our warp nacelles and the parts, the struts, I guess, that hold them on there. And I have the wiring going into the body to look on the underside. Obviously, I don't have the bottom attached yet. I just want to point out a few things for the running lights. I have the green and red fiber optics. Those are just painted. I took some transparent paints and painted them. There's a white LED kind of buried underneath some UV resin, and then a little bit of black hot glue to light block that light. And I thought about putting actual green and red lights, but because I'm doing the running lights on the nacelles with painted fiber optics, I felt it best to keep it consistent so one doesn't look different than the other. So that's the reason for that. Up here I have this will be my strobe, my warning collision light, I guess it's called. And that is I think a 1.5 millimeter pre-wired LED, as you can see here, that's just glued into there. And then it's attached to this controller, which allows me to do multiple effects. I can strobe, flash, flicker, adjust the speed of it, do all sorts of things for a particular light. So that's going to be set on a strobe, and then all that will come in. All this will meet up together with the lights, and then we'll run it through the bottom of the ship. So also have to attach some of the, of course, these covering pieces here, and fill up any gaps that I may have. And then there's a few other pieces. Now for the windows, it's not going to be, I don't have any kind of interior, so I'm painting the plastic clear parts black from the inside, so they still have kind of a glassy look. I'll have to attach those in each of these segments. There's several ones throughout the ship. And then once all that's done and sealed up and I get my wiring ready, I'll attach that to the bottom of the ship. As you can see here, I'm preparing the bottom of the ship to be displayed. I decided to attach to this adjustable, just a like a projector mount that you would attach to your ceiling, and I guess a small projector will attach to that. Works great on there. It comes in these little black pieces. I've epoxied it in there and then put some hot glue just for good measure around the exterior of it. So it seems to be in there nice and firm. I don't think it's going anywhere, but this will allow me to adjust angles and different things. Now, one thing, I won't be able to run wiring straight through because it's a solid piece right here. So what I'll be doing is cutting another hole, and it'll be exposed wiring, but it'll come down, it'll go through here and then out the bottom and into a wood base that this is going to be attached to. So that's my plan for, and I've done this before a few times, and I just like being able to kind of adjust the angle of attack or whatever I want to do with that. I do have my mission pod primed up, and this is actually going to serve as my base color, the primer, and it's looking good. I trimmed the fiber optics a little bit, but I still have to trim all the way down once I get completed with all the painting. But I'm pretty pleased with how that came out. There were some gaps here I had to fill with putty where these arms come out to attach to the ship. And of course, that's going to sit across over here. But pretty happy with how that came out, especially these gaps filled in. My removable magnetic back piece is working good. There will be a little bit of a gap, but it's not that noticeable. And the functionality kind of offsets the little bit of a gap that's going to be present on this part of the ship. So from here, I'm going to assemble everything and get it ready for painting. We'll have to install the windows. They'll have to be masked off. And when I come back, I'll try to show you if it's primer coat. All right, I've have it all assembled. All my extra pieces went in. I had to do quite a bit of body work, as to be expected on these older models. I had some gaps here. I had to work on the seam line from the bottom and top halves of the ship. As you can see, I have it all masked off and ready for our primer coat. I've got my wiring down here. I've tested it. Everything's working. I'm going to remove my stand when I go to prime it. Now underneath these parts right here, it's hollow. I don't know why they made these hollow, but I filled it in first with a little putty, and then I went back in with some baking soda and super glue to fill that in. So I'm going to see how that looks. It may need a little bit more sanding to give it a cleaner look, but we'll be able to see. I'll be able to see it more once I prime those in. So those are hollow and had some injection marks inside of it, and it just didn't look good. So I'm just trying to give a solid look on it if you do look up under it. So let's just put some primer on this and see where we're at. All right, as you can see here, I have a lot of the detail painting done. There's a lot of paneling colors going on. I'm not trying to be 100% accurate to like the studio model. I'm just trying to do it in the style of how that was painted, with a lot of different colors throughout the panels, and then just kind of doing my own thing on a few things here and there. But I'm just trying to get a lot of paneling shades going on. I used a mixture of colors. People always want to know the paints, but it really doesn't matter. It's just different shades of gray. I have some aggressor gray, some grazy. I have some ocean gray mixed in with some white gray. For the yellow, I use transparent yellow to do around the warp nacelles and the RCS thrusters, I believe those are. Now I did I think this is the warp core up here, and I did that with a little bit of brass. Obviously I did some brown. I mixed this brown, pale brown, with some gray actually. It still came out pretty brown, even though I mixed it in with like some lighter grays. And just a lot of masking off the different panels. I still have some to do, but I have a lot of it done, as you can see here. And just giving it a lot of variation in the colors. A lot of the, this was the Vallejo white gray. I don't have it handy here, but didn't want to go too stark. There's actually some whites in there. And also just kind of how thick I put the coat on. Some of the colors are actually the same, but they look a little different because I just sprayed it on a little bit heavier. We have our mission module here. I'll paint it up and working. I've trimmed the fiber optics and they're working. And of course that will sit on here. Now I'm thinking once I get everything done, I may glue that into place, because with this stand, it actually can move up and down, and this slides on and off too easily. So I may actually, I don't know how permanent, maybe just a little bit of tacky glue. Looks like I got some cleanup here. I have some chipping. I've had a little bit of issue with some paint coming off. I may have to look at switching my primer. I don't know if it's a particular can I'm using, or it hasn't given me issues in the past, but the last couple of projects I've had some paint come off pretty easy. And same with some of this, I had some paint come off on the very front end. I had to repaint that. So a little bit of double work going on here. So from here, we still, of course, have all the mask on, so of course that'll be pulled off. There's still a little bit more detail painting. These little square parts here are like a pale color. I'll need to paint those. I'll probably put on a clear gloss coat. Obviously we need to put the decals on, and I'll probably do some very light weathering. I don't want to go too heavy on it, but I do want it to make it look like it's used. And so I think I'm going to go ahead and finish up the project, because it's getting this video is running pretty long, I think, now. And when we come back, we'll look at the finished Runabout. All right, well, here is my finished Star Trek AMT Runabout, and finished up all the detail painting. And then for weathering, I just used some dry pastels. I didn't do any kind of washes or Panaline accent color, just some dry pastels, some chalk pastels, if you will, ground up, and just with different types of old paint brushes, some with just very small, fine tips to it, just kind of outlining some of the panel lines, darkening in some of the different areas inside this kind of maintenance area, I guess, darkening that in so it's just not a clean look. Not very heavy, just enough to give it a little bit of a weathered look. and then finish that up with a clear acrylic matte coat to tone everything down. And once I got all that done, I removed all my masks from the windows. Now, I did have quite a bit of issues with my paint peeling, and I think that's just my fault. This is the second time in recent builds that I've taken these old model kits, old AMT kits that are probably 30 years old or more, and I haven't washed them or anything. They've been sitting around, and I'm sure that plastic just develops kind of greasiness to it over the years, and I didn't wash it. So a lot of I've never had this kind of problem, and I've had two fairly recently, and I had several issues when I tried to lift up the masking or with the decals. I had some issues with the decals, and so I had to do a lot of touch-up painting. So just a lot of extra work I had to do, but in the end, I'm very happy with how it came out. Really happy with all the different panel colors coming together, and I think it just makes for a very detailed model and very nice looking model. Every time I do one of these kind of builds, I kind of grew fond to the subject matter. I wasn't that much of a Runabout fan, but building the kit, now looking at it closely and all, and especially when it comes out good, just very pleased with it. You can see I have my lights on my sensor array up here. It does come off. The battery compartment is in here, but it does take a little bit of finagling to get that in and out, so I just didn't feel like doing that on camera. So it's on. I do have one that's a little bit dimmer. Not much I can do about that. It's not a big deal. It's on. It's just not quite as bright as the other ones. It must not be aligned with the light. So that sits on here. And I wish I would have thought about it. I didn't think about it till later. Putting some magnets in here and some magnets inside the wing to where that would have locked better into position. With my mount, I can tilt and angle this different ways if I wanted to, but with this, it would just slide off unless it's level. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off for a second. We'll set that over there so you can kind of get a better look at the paint job. And we'll look at the back, and I'll turn the lighting on. Now in the base is a battery holder holding 8 AA batteries. So I believe that's 12 volts going on there. And we'll have all our lights. So we'll cut that on, and really happy with how the lights worked out. It's a bit more blue than it looks on here. It's kind of a more turquoise blue on the camera, but it is a very blue color. It's not super bright, so I think that turned out well. Very happy with the facade collectors. There's no hot spots. They have a really nice warm glow to them, so very happy how those turned out. The orange inside here, I think that's lit well. I just wish I would have come up with something to give the kind of that mesh pattern that you see on the original part. Got my strobe going, a nice little effect, kind of brings it to life a little bit more. My running lights are pretty good. They may be a little hard to see on camera, but they're not overly bright, but they're definitely there when you look at them, and there are 2 on each side and 2 on the back here. And of course we have our if I can lift this up to where you can actually see, we have our impulse engines are also lit, and we have a nice little warm glow for those. And so I just ran all those wires through the base. And I did have some issues, like I said, with the decals. I did the Ganges 72454, and the last decal I put on was this front one, and I had some issues. They're old decals, and it kind of fell apart, and I didn't have a replacement, so I actually put on, I think, the Rio Grande's 72453, so it actually has a different number. I know that's kind of messed up, but I still wanted that detail in there. I had some other issues getting some of these other decals on. Oddly enough, the side ones went on just fine. There's one underneath that's on. But a little bit of issue with those old decals. They wanted to, what happens when I put some microsol on them, it just tore them all up. They were fine kind of up until that point. I was trying to get it to, blend into the model, and the microsol was just too much for those old decals. It just shriveled them up more than they... you'd have to see it. I ended up that's what happened on this top part here. I messed that decal up. I had to use the one from the bottom on the top, so it doesn't have the decal on the bottom. But it just shriveled up. It shriveled up and messed up, and it was beyond fixing. And I actually had to resand this whole thing because when I took it off, it caused paint peeling. So I had to resand and repaint this whole section right here. It was more of a blue color, like is here on the sides, and so I went more with kind of a gray blue color right there. And I think it looks good. And there's a lot of different contrasting panels, but I think they all kind of work together to give us a nice model full of detail, color variation, and contrast going on. And we can put our sensor array back on to give it that little more aggressive look. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed the video. Until next time, everybody have a good one.